Okay, so you're asking for a definition of evidence. A
Yes,
body of objectively
basically.
verifiable facts that are positively indicative of and or exclusively concordant with one available position or hypothesis over any other.
How are you defining facts here?
I just said objectively verifiable data.
No, but you said objectively verifiable facts, but you
Right.
didn't really
It's a bit
define.
redundant. It's a bit redundant because people don't understand. The reason I say that is because people don't understand that the word fact is already objectively verifiable data. So
So
it's not a
is
fact just because you say it's a fact. It's a fact when we can show that it's a fact.
is the law of non-contradiction a fact?
I don't know if that qualifies as a fact. We put this together. We analyze the universe in properties of it, and we try to work out the laws of that universe. Well, when we summarize by a mathematical equation or a summary statement what we think the properties of the universe are, we have gotten them wrong before. So it's our best estimation.
Yeah. So the statement something X cannot be both X and not X at the same time in the same way. That's not a fact about reality.
I would say that I'm certainly going to adhere to that. But if it's something that we worked out about the universe, again, it's up to human foibles. I'm going to say that to the extent of our knowledge, no, you can't be something and both not be that something.
The discussion about what evidence is really a philosophical discussion.
Why?
It's because you don't have any experiment to answer that question. You don't have any, you can't take me to a lab and show me under a microscope what evidence is. You need to define it first in order to regard whatever you're going to show me as evidence. Okay. So you need to have a certain epistemic framework prior to your scientific investigation in order to regard anything at all as evidence.
Okay.
Okay, so let me just ask a question, because we were talking about the law of non-contradiction earlier, and you seem to say that you affirmed it in the sense that that's how you use it to operate and to live by. But on the other hand, it seemed like you also said that we couldn't demonstrate that the law of non-contradiction is actually a true principle. So I'm wondering what, sort of the connection between those two things are, because if it can't be demonstrated, why are you at the same time taking it or believing in it? I guess you would say that you believe in it, but you don't know that it's true.
I'm happy to assume that it's true. I could say that I know it's true to the degree that we can't show that it's false. I mean, there's no way. How do you falsify that? You would have to show something that is both itself and not itself.
Yeah,
so we're not going to have that.
Yeah, but I mean, if
philosophical conversations are just completely lost on me. I mean, I'm waiting for the meat.
Okay, but
philosophical conversation, they just never show up.
Yeah. So, but the issue though is if you have falsifiability as a principle in order to, as you said, demonstrate something or in order to have knowledge of it, then even by your own admission of what you just said, we could never really have knowledge of the law of non-contradiction and knowing that it's true, because it can't be falsified.
I said we can't verify it as a fact. We can assume it as a fact, but how would you test that? And I'm happy to assume that it is a fact. So and I'm still looking for the relevance.
So then you think that we can assume that certain things are fact without having knowledge of them, and that's okay?
Don't we have knowledge of that?
Well, I thought you just said that we don't.
I said that when you define something as a fact because it's objectively verifiable, how do you objectively verify that something can be and both can't be what it is?
Right. So if the standard for
we don't use the word fact, well, we can still use the word knowledge because we have examples of things being what they are. We have no possibility of it not being what it is. So then when we don't have that, then we can establish, okay, yeah, then that has to be true.
Right. Well, that would be considered a necessary being or a necessary fact.
No, it wouldn't.
Yes, it would, because you just said it couldn't possibly be another way, which means that it's necessary.
I said there's no possibility of it.
Right, which means that it's necessary.
Which means that there's literally no possibility.
Yeah,
So
but
I want to know why you believe.
I get that, Aaron. But then, in order for me to understand why you don't believe, I need to break your epistemology down and understand what, in your view, qualifies something to be a justified belief and what doesn't. And in the same way, you're going to need to understand my point of view. But it seems that here you're really unconcerned. You're undermining the value of philosophy, and it seems like that's why.
I believe there is a value of philosophy. It's just wholly misused in religion.
But when you say that mind is by definition a product of brain, then you're just you're skipping over a whole bunch of philosophy. That's like in the philosophy of mind, these discussions are huge, and the literature out there is expansive. So when you say that it is by definition a particular theory of mind, so you choose a particular theory of mind that is not in any way uncontroversial, and you say that this particular theory is by definition what we're going to link the term mind to, that's very philosophically unsophisticated, if I can put it like that. Okay. Because there are a lot of other theories of mind out there that can preclude the idea of a brain existing, or at least they don't necessitate the reliance on a physical structure. So the problem here is that you want to skip over a whole bunch of philosophy. You want to bring your materialistic presuppositions to the table, and you want us to provide you with evidence based on your presuppositions without us questioning them whatsoever. And I think that's kind of contradictory with the idea of you being a skeptic. I mean, you should be skeptical about your views, right? We should question everything. We should be reasonable about our views.
I think the issue is this, is that when we seek to analyze this question about a necessary being, and obviously you hold on to the hard atheist position that there is definitely no necessary being, the question then becomes, okay, we've got this body.
Why would it be necessary?
What do you mean, why would it be necessary?
Why would it be necessary?
So do you know what a necessary being would be? What that refers to?
No, I'm asking you.
Okay, so necessary being means that which exists and couldn't be any other way. Yeah. So when we talk about a necessary being, we're saying that there's something that exists as a foundation to reality that has to be and couldn't be any other particular way, which is contrasted to something which we call a possible or contingent being. Are you aware of these terms?
Yeah, I've heard them before. They're just nonsense. Because
why would you say they're nonsense?
So badly for there to be this being that you're going to deem it necessary when it's clearly not, and not involved. Not only is it not necessary, but it's not relevant.
Do you understand what being means in this in the term necessary being?
I don't understand what you mean by it.
Well, how are you interpreting it in your own head? How are you interpreting this idea?
If I were to define a being, I would say something that exists and also has consciousness.
Right. So in philosophy, we normally, when we talk about being, we're talking about that which exists. So when we say necessary being or contingent being, we're talking about something that has to exist. Yeah, it doesn't give a particular ontology about consciousness or not. That's a separate discussion. It's not just the fact that it breaks the laws, the known laws of nature. It's the fact that it has no laws to govern its coming into being.
Yeah, that's pretty fair. I mean, the concise definition would be that magic and miracles, miraculous magic, magical miracles, whatever, they're the evocation of supernatural forces or entities to control or forecast natural events in ways that are inexplicable by science because they defy the laws of physics, making them physically impossible. Okay, but if there was magic, then you could use magic to make things happen, and we'd be able to verify when somebody used magic to make something happen. There'd be repeated demonstrations and that sort of thing. There's a way to show that there's actually a truth there, even if we can't explain it, even if there's no scientific explanation possible for that.
Yeah, because but what I'm saying. So let me give you an example of this. You know, in the stars in galaxies, the ones that are on the edges of galaxies, they orbit at the same speed or faster than the stars that are closer to the central mass, the supermassive black hole. Yeah. Now, according to the theory of gravity, yeah, that completely contradicts that theory of gravity, because the stars on the edges of galaxies should be slower If it's not slower, if it's going at the same speed as the stars towards the closer to the central mass of the galaxy, they would break its orbit. Yeah. So that's something that breaks.
Not an orbit.
What's that?
That's not an orbit. I've seen the models of galaxy movement, and it's not that way, and it's not an issue of their orbits. They don't orbit it. I mean, when everything is rotating together, it's not an orbit.
Okay, they're moving, they're rotating together.
Yeah.
But the ones at the edge
There's no
of the universe.
violation against gravity there, and even if there was, but there's not.
No. So there's two things, isn't it? There's two things. They've made these observations. So there's two things that they could use. And this is what I'm trying to say about the issue of magic. Yeah. Why we don't appeal to it. The first way to interpret the data is to turn around and say that our whole theory of gravity is completely wrong. We need to rechange it. Yeah. In order to incorporate this new observation. That's one way to solve the problem. The second way to solve the problem is to posit a form of matter that exists that exhibits gravity, but we just can't see it. Dark matter. And that's pretty much where the current science is. So what they're doing is
fortunately not. The right now, and this is recent, so that's why you wouldn't know about it. It was just days ago that somebody's just got $100,000 grant to pursue a physical theory that replaces dark matter, or the need for dark matter, with and I'm not into physics, so I can't remember exactly what it was, but it's a subatomic particle that, instead of being massless, is now taken to have a small amount of mass and can somehow account for the former necessity of dark matter.
Yeah, so it doesn't really matter in terms of the particular explanation, or theory or model that they propose to explain this. What I'm trying to show is that when it comes to our observations as human beings, what we do is we think that the universe operates according to comprehensibility, something that's comprehensible. And so if we see an event, we seek an explanation behind the event. If we don't have an explanation behind the event, we call it magical, and therefore we dismiss it, because we dismiss magic. I.e., there has to be an explanation behind things that we observe within the universe. This is what I'm saying. So I'm saying I agree with you, Aron, in terms of saying that magic doesn't exist, and that if we see some sort of event within the universe, we look for an underlying explanation for it. Yeah. So I agree with you on that. So, and I agree with you that we cannot therefore come to a conclusion about something that exists, some event that has no underlying explanation for its existence within the universe. Yeah. This would be something that we'd dismiss out of hand. So, for example, if the magician literally gets a rabbit out of the hat with no explanation, we dismiss it. Yeah, we in fact, we wouldn't say literally he's taking it out of the hat. We just simply say, no, there is an explanation. It's just that maybe we don't know what the explanation is. Yeah. So we look for explanation behind things.
So we can call something unexplained. And when scientists call something unexplained, the believers say, translate that as explained by God.
No, we're not saying anything which is explained by God, nothing like that. But what I'm trying to show is this, is we don't just use observations. Rather, we have logical axioms, yeah, in order to understand and interpret those observations. So whether it is dark matter or this new fundamental theory of particle physics that explains why the orbits of the rotations of stars around galaxies, the speed that they're at, whatever it is, what we're saying is that on the fundamental layer of these observations is an explanation that causes it to be the way it is. And therefore, as human beings or scientists, we try to seek out an underlying explanation. So I'm saying is that you have observations here, you have logical axioms as well, and you bring them both together in order to interpret the data. So in this situation, this example, what you're using is something called the principle of sufficient reason. Yeah, you're looking at reasons behind our observations as a presupposition or an axiom or logical axiom to interpret data. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Do you agree with that?
Yes.
The issue is that it's not about the particular model. Like, for example, the rotation of stars in galaxies. It's not about whether we have to change the theory of gravity, whether it's dark matter, whether it's this new particle that's in existence that explains why it is. What we're doing is we're seeing an observation. We're saying there is an explanation. There is an explanation, for it. Now, what that particular explanation is, we'd have to investigate further. But what I'm saying is that if we accept that as a principle, then if we're saying these things which are possibilities, i.e. contingent beings, require an explanation. Now, either the explanation is going to be upon another thing which is contingent, which then requires another explanation, or it's going to be upon an explanation that's founded upon something that's necessary, which means that it doesn't require any further explanation than its own existence, like a three-sided triangle. You don't ask the question why it's three sides.
Sorry?
You threw all of that out and jumped to Magic Invisible Man.
No, see what we're discussing right now, Aron. I don't want you to change definitions here. The reason we've made this discussion about a necessary being is because it kind of streamlines the discussion. We're not concerned with all the other properties. We can have a different stream where we discuss the other properties that we say God has. But in order to get somewhere, we have to kind of streamline the discussion and not keep jumping around to different places when we actually make some progress. So right now, everything in existence that is contingent, by your admission and by your concession, requires an explanation external to itself, because you've already said that everything requires an explanation. So if we can establish that a multiplicity of contingent things doesn't make it necessary, like, for example, my laptop requires an explanation, 100 laptops requires an explanation, an infinite number of laptops also requires an explanation, and we take the set of all contingent things in existence and we say that it requires an explanation external to itself. By definition, that explanation cannot be contingent, because we've already said that it explains all contingent things.
So what I'm saying, Aron, is that we were trying to build an argument for the necessary being. You agreed to the principle of sufficient reason, so we're on the same page there. Then what we're trying to explain is we have all these different things that we experience in reality that are contingent, that require an explanation for them outside of themselves. And so the question is, do we get to a bedrock thing that is necessary, that explains all these other contingent facts, or do we just keep going on ad infinitum with all these different contingent beings? The only two really possible options at this point is to say, well, there has to be some sort of necessary being that is the grounds and explains all these other contingent facts, or we just keep adding on more and more contingent facts ad infinitum, and we don't really get anywhere.
Or so matter and energy are eternal, never created, and then we don't have this problem at all.
But then you would say that matter and energy in that case would be necessary, and then you have a necessary being. It just happens to be matter and energy, right?
The reason being that it's not possible for there to be absolutely nothing.
Well, but I'm saying even in that equation, if you rejected an infinite regress and you said, well, the thing that's eternal is this matter and energy. Well, the question is that matter and energy that's eternal, is it necessary or is it a contingent fact? If you say that it's contingent, then it needs an explanation outside of itself. Or if you say that it's necessary, then you agree with us that there is something that is necessary. You just think that it's matter and energy. And then we could have a discussion about that.
Okay.
So, I mean, which one of those options would you, at this point, would you go with? Would you say that you think matter and energy is eternal but doesn't have to be necessary, and then we still have to figure out, well, what
if it's
explains
necessary,
that?
The only thing that makes it necessary is that it's not possible for there to be absolutely nothing. At least I don't think it's possible for there to be absolutely nothing, and that impossibility would make the existence of something necessary. And
right. Okay.
None of it is relevant to what we're talking about.
No, it is because we're using, as we described in the beginning, what being was. We're not restricting it to this sort of God with consciousness and all that stuff. We're not adding that baggage into the equation.
We should. But, we could have another conversation about that.
We could. But before you go, I want to be clear on where we're leaving off. At this point, to me, it seems like you're agreeing that there is something necessary by the fact that you're saying you don't think that there could ever be absolutely nothing. And if that thing that is necessary is something like matter and energy or some configuration of it, then that, in terms of philosophy,
would be a necessary being in that respect, we would disagree with that, but at least we would agree that there is something that is necessary, and then we could have a further discussion about which model best describes what should actually be considered necessary and what shouldn't.
Again, I don't deal with physics at all, and I know that Sean Carroll, although I would have said that it's impossible for there to be nothing, I know that Sean Carroll said that it is conceptually possible for there to be absolutely nothing. And so with that being the case, that means that matter and energy, if never created, are not necessarily necessary. So
but you would disagree with Sean, though, right?
But we agree upon that.
Yeah,
we would agree that sorry, Jake, really quick. We would agree that conceptually nothing is not impossible. So we agree logically that's basically we're saying it's logically possible for there to be nothing. It's only logically possible for there to be something. So we agree upon that. What Jake was saying is that, look, what we're coming to the conclusion is this, is that you've got contingent being here. Contingent being requires an explanation. Either it has another explanation, which is another contingent being ad infinitum in a series of contingent beings and a chain that goes back forever, or there's a necessary foundation, a necessary thing within reality. Now,
and the necessary thing could be the eternity itself.
We agree with you, and that's what we're
negates the whole argument.
We're agreeing with you, Aron. Right now, we're just trying to decide if there's anything necessary in reality or everything is contingent. If we could get to a point where we agree that something has to be necessary, even if we don't know what it is, then we could have a further discussion about what the necessary being would be in terms of examining its and things like that. But we can't skip the step, because if we don't even agree that there's a necessary being, then it makes no sense to skip that step trying to go through this process.
Okay.